Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning or the afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. So Jen and I are excited to present the second half of the FME 2020 Unleashed series called Automation. So just a sec here. And there's us. We're looking great this morning, aren't we, Jen?
We are looking great. That's
Yeah.
definitely probably not how we look today working from home, but
No,
one needs to know
that's
that.
right. Okay, so first, before we get started, we wanted to talk a little bit about the thing that's on everybody's mind, and that's the COVID-19. First of all, we hope everybody is looking after themselves and all those they care about and doing everything they need to do and social distancing. And we really want, everybody who works for SAFE, all our partners and all our customers to really be careful and really look after those yourself and those you care about. So part of that, SAFE's always had a part of what we do is to be good corporate citizens, and so addressing that. If anybody's doing anything in any way related to COVID-19, doesn't matter where you are, please contact us, and we're happy to provide you with whatever FME you need to help deal with this virus. So yeah, so just you can see the URL there, safe.com/COVID-19, and server, desktop, whatever you want, anything on the platform, we're happy to provide. If you're also stuck at home and you don't have access to your corporate licenses, or you just want to learn FME during this time or anything like that, also reach out to us and we'll be happy to provide a home license for you, so you can have some FME, use FME for whatever you want at that time. So yeah, so anything that's pilots, proof of concepts, learning, the home license is perfect for that. So yeah. So our agenda. So yes, data serenity is what we're going to be talking about today. And the first thing on the agenda, of course, security. That brings serenity to everybody's heart, we know. And then Jen's going to walk us through FME server apps and show some of the amazing things that are there, as well as some automation stuff. And then we're going to talk a little bit about enterprise integration patterns, which is a new capability of FME 2020 server. And last but not least is the pay-as-you-go licensing and other options on how to procure or get FME. Yeah. So here we are. I'm not sure whether I'm the lizard or I'm the zipster. So Jen, which one do you think I look more like?
I don't think I can answer this question well, can I?
Okay, so first we're going to do a poll just to get a little understanding of who has tuned in online. And so Stephanie's going to start the poll. Yeah.
Yep. So just pick which version of server you're currently using.
That's right.
I guess we didn't have the option for 2020 on there in case anybody's installed it already, actually.
Yeah, just get rid of that.
Votes are still coming in a little bit, so I'm going to leave it up for another 2 seconds here, and I'm going to close it.
Great. Right. And then good. So then it should pop up, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, maybe you guys can't see it, but we've got about 45% of people using FME 2019, 12%
there we go.
Now 2018. And we got quite a big majority who are not currently using FME server, so they should be excited about this webinar.
Yeah, perfect. So yes, thanks again
for a treat.
For tuning in. And it's great to see the number of people who are using 2019, so that's great. So you'll be familiar with some of the stuff, and you'll be very excited by how we've taken features introduced in 2019 and really expanded on them in 2020. And also those who haven't used FME server, we're happy to have you with us as well. So great. So awesome. So now so let's talk a little bit about security. Security is something that's always important to every organization. And with each release of FME, we add, we expand that to make it FME server more secure as larger and larger organizations are deploying FME. And in fact, we have some very, very large FME deployments out there with running hundreds of engines. And so security is really key to them. So the first one is now when the admin password, when you log in for the first time, you are forced to pick a new password. So the first time you log in, it would be admin, of course, as we all know. But then you're immediately forced to choose a new password. Okay, and the password that you choose must follow the default password rules that are now shipped with FME, and that is must be a minimum of 8 characters, and it must not contain the username in the password. So yeah, so that's good there. Also, now you can set a password expiration time, so you can specify the number of days. By default, this is off, but you can simply easily turn it on under the admin section of FME server, and then you can pick how many days, 30, 90, 180, whatever you want. Also, now administrators can force users to change password on the next login. And so if a user has forgotten their password or needs a password, often an administrator will send them a password, and then they can click change password on next login, and then the user will be forced to change the password so that that password that they were sent will only be used for the initial login. So also, this is another one requested by users. This is the ability to only allow users to be logged into one browser. And in this case, you would simply enable this, and the user would only be able to log into one session. So if they went to log into another browser, they would be logged out of any other browser that they were logged into. So again, a good security enhancement. Also, we've added yet another thing that was added by requested by users, the ability for administration, an admin user, to broadcast messages to all users who are on server. Under system configuration broadcast messages, what you see there, you would simply click create, and then you would type your message. You can specify whether it's an information message, a warning message, or critical. And then once you've done that, every user would see it on their home screen, and they would know what is going on. So it's also useful for safe. From time to time, we may let users know about a critical security patch or something like that. And again, we would broadcast it. The administrator can read it and then decide when to take it down and things like that. So just really makes it really easy for administrators to connect and communicate with all the users on the server. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass this over to Jen, who's going to talk and tell us all about FME server apps.
Yep. So let me see if I can present my screen, or Steph's going to ask me to present my screen. Let's make sure it's the right one. Okay. Can you see the server apps slide page?
We can. Yep.
Yay. Okay, great.
That's present button.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, so for FME server apps, looks like a lot of users already are on 2019. So you will have seen FME server apps, but we have made them a lot better for 2020. So just in case anybody isn't aware of FME server apps, what they are, we basically added functionality in last year that gives a really nice user interface for users. They don't necessarily have to be FME server users anymore to be able to run workspaces. So you get like a nice page, you can add an image at the top, any workspace parameters that you need people to be able to provide input on, lets them do all of that and then run the workspace and get back the output that they're expecting from this without needing to be FME server users and log in and navigate the interface. So for FME Server 2020, we've made apps a lot better. So one of the things that I was asking for a while was adding this geometry picker. So now with apps, if you are sort of adding sort of a spatial input, you want to add in a polygon or a point to kick off your FME server app, now you can bring up a map window to make that a lot easier than trying to remember GeoJSON strings and paste that in all that long coordinates. One of the features that was requested a lot by users was adding the ability to authenticate apps. So we've added that in now. And we also have the option to run apps immediately. So I think this is one that, Don, you were pretty keen on. Sometimes you might make an app that doesn't really have any input parameters. You just want people to run it and immediately get the output back.
Yeah, that's right. I had an app that was simply streaming back a web page that had other options, and so I didn't want that. So that was where I used that. Yeah.
Yeah. So now if people go to that URL, if it's sort of streaming something back into your browsers, they'll see that straight away without seeing a blank-ish page with just an OK or run button. So that's got a lot better as well. So one of the things I'll show you in here is now if you want to be able to use the map picker, we have added a new type of published parameter inside Workbench now. So when you're authoring your workspaces, before you publish them to FME server, you need to make sure that your published parameter type is set to geometry. And then just like any other parameters, you can give it a name, you can give it a prompt. And there is this configuration parameter. So if, say, you only wanted to have users select an area inside Vancouver, you can set those initial bounds to be the bounds around Vancouver or wherever you're located. And then they'll sort of see that place first, and then they get to pick their geometry from within that window. So then once you've done that, you will end up with something like this. When someone clicks on that parameter in your FME server app, you'll get a nice little map picker. You can draw a polygon, you can put a point down there, and then that will put the GeoJSON string as your input parameter. So let's go to Workbench. So I'm going to show you an FME server app here that does have that published parameter set up in here. So unfortunately, because of the virus, this is a little bit of a spoiler for what would have been the wrap-up game on World Tour. So don't pay too much attention to Transformers. And what I'm going to show you in here is inside the navigator. So what this workspace will be doing is taking an input place, you'll choose whereabouts you're located, and then this workspace is going to use the Yelp connector. So go and use the Yelp API and then pull back the top 5 tourist attractions, restaurants, parks, and ice cream places near your location that you specified on input. So you can see in the navigator here on the left-hand side, if I make that a little bit bigger, you can do the drop down. I've got this location point parameter here. If I right click on edit definition, you can see I've set that to be geometry. And then you can go in here and configure initial bounds if you wanted to. And then you're going to publish this to FME server. So I'm just going to close Workbench down to publish this to FME server. And if I can exit this. So this one is another sneaky new feature in FME 2020. So I don't have this one written down on the slides, but I think it's going to make a lot of people incredibly happy. So I'm going to publish my workspace to FME server inside this wrap-up folder. I've already got a workspace in here. So now, and you'll also notice as well for 2020, the side menu bar has had a bit of a reorganization, just to try and make this a little bit more intuitive for users. So now under Workspaces, Manage Workspaces, you now have a button in the top right for uploading. So you can now use this upload button to publish your workspaces to FME server. So I can click up that Wrap-Up 2020 Vancouver. I'm going to give it a different name just so it doesn't replace that one. And upload it.
Wow.
And then just like you would get in the publish wizard, you can choose which services you want to register it with. So I'm going to choose data streaming. It's writing out a PDF output, so that will just get streamed back in my browser. I've chosen that right to there, and then confirm.
Wow.
And I just published a workspace using the web UI.
Wow. How about drag and drop? Does that also work?
Yes, but I'm not going to show it because that would mean moving my windows around on a Mac.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. No worries. Yep.
Yeah. But then if you change your mind, say I didn't want that registered with the job submitter service anymore, or the data streaming, or maybe I wanted to add the data download, you can just select your workspace in here, actions, edit services, and then you can go back in there and choose, say, data download and confirm that. And then it will be registered with those services that you need. So a few caveats with this. One thing that the publish wizard would do that this does not, so if you have any web connections or basically anything sort of extra to the workspace like custom transformers, they won't get published with the workspace through the web UI. You'll need to make sure that they are already on FME server. So in this case, the workspace I had open, it was using a Yelp web connection. That's already published to the server, so the workspace will know that and it will just use it. But if this was the first time publishing it, I would want to do it through Workbench if you had those extra things in the workspace. So now what we want to do is go and have a look at our FME server app for this wrap-up. So I've got this one here. So for those that are new to FME server apps, you can sort of give your app a description. You'll select which workspace you want the app to run, what service you want the workspace to run under. So now one of the new features was requiring this authentication. So if you want authenticated users to be able to run your app, they will need a FME server username and password. And then you can assign the app to be used by either different roles. So here I've just specified the author role, the admin role. But for example, if I wanted to give Brian specific access to my app, I could just like select him and Dimitri, and they would appear in here and they would now have permission to use the app. So if they tried to use it, then they would get prompted to sign in, just put in their username and password before it would show them the app. And then the other new feature we've got in here is the run immediately. If you wanted to turn that on, you would go under the customize panel, select run immediately, and then that wouldn't show you any of the input publish parameters. It would just run it straight away. But for this one, I don't want that. I've made my app pretty in here, hopefully. And then inside the parameters drop down, you can choose which ones you want to show in the app. For this workspace, I just want the input coordinates with the map picker. So now you'll see this little icon if it's going to bring up the map window. And this also works under the Run Workspace page too. You can have the option to bring up that map window. So I'm going to come back out of here because it was already working, hopefully. So if I open this FME server app, you can see here I've got my little map picker, got the lizard up there relaxing, hopefully. And I can go in here and choose a place.
And it showed the whole globe because your initial position was the whole globe, right?
Yeah, I didn't put in those default map window coordinates.
Yeah.
So in here, we've got the office selected, roughly the location of our office. And then this button allows you to put a point down on the map, so you can move that wherever you want. You can draw polygons, you can draw lines. So I'm going to press confirm for that one, and then you can see the coordinates go in here. So now this should run my report. And you can see it's just streaming me back a PDF into the browser. You can see the top 5 yoga studios, the top 5 healthy restaurants in Vancouver. And these will be all the ones that are near our office that have the highest rankings, I think, on Yelp, the best reviews. So that's a look into FME server apps for 2020, some of the new features we've got in there, the improvements we've made. So hopefully that makes apps just so much better for 2020. So then the next thing we're going to have a look at is automations. So these were really good in 2019. We were all really excited about them, but I think 2020 just takes them to the next level. So we'll have a look at some of the things that we've added in to do that. But in case you're not sure what automations are, just as a bit of a recap from last year, so these are event-driven workflows consisting of triggers and actions. So if you're on one of the older releases of FME Server, this is sort of the notification service, but we've made it so much easier to use with the input sort of trigger types and then the actions. You can build it in a user interface just like you build your workspaces inside Workbench. So you can see in this one, we've got a directory watch that we want to trigger a workspace. So you would just add your directory watch trigger type in here and then just connect it to a workspace and they would just run. As soon as files arrived in that directory watch, the workspace would run. Yep, so our theme last year was allowing users to start to orchestrate complex workflows. And it doesn't need to just be a one-to-one relationship. In there, you can have lots of different trigger types, lots of different actions all downstream, and build those workspaces or workflows up. So what we had last year as well, for every workspace that you would add on into your automation, you would get the success and failure port. So for some people, they might have added the email notifications. If a workspace was failing, you would connect that to the failure port. And then if the workspace succeeded, you could carry on with your automation and workflow and continue your data processing. But I think one of the feedbacks that we had was that you couldn't take data outside of your workspace. So the automation would only know if things had passed or failed and build your logic from that. So for 2020, we've added enterprise support for enterprise integration. So what we're allowing people to do now is pass data out of those workspaces. So I think, Don, you're going to talk a little bit more about that
Yes.
after I've shown everyone how you can do looping. So this was something else that was asked for as well. I saw on our Knowledge Center on our ideas page, people were asking to be able to loop within automations. So we have added that in for 2020. So now when you've enabled looping, that means you can resubmit your workspaces if they fail. But I've put on this slide external factors. So some of the reasons people were asking for in the Knowledge Center, or where this would be useful and applicable, is if you were writing perhaps to a database and you were having like network connectivity issues, so your workspace was failing because of that. So it's not a failure sort of because of something in the workspace, it's something that can be fixed by resubmitting the workspace. Whereas if it was you had like messed up your transformer configuration, if you were starting to loop that, you would probably just end up with an endless loop and sort of end up using your engines on your server continuously. So this can be useful if your workspaces potentially might fail due to external factors. And then it also allows you to create process manager workflows, which is one of the enterprise integration patterns I think we're going to touch on in a few minutes. So if you want to add looping inside your automation, you'll see now the looped sort of workflows or lines are dashed, so you can sort of trace those along in your automation. So this is a simple example that I built. You've got an incoming email. It's going to go to a workspace that's just processing the photos. It knows they've been received. And then just in case this workspace fails, because I was having it write to a SQLite database, both of these workspaces, hoping that because the SQLite database can't cope with too many connections at once, there's a chance it might fail on writing. So if it does that, I want the workspace to loop and then try again, basically until it succeeds when the database doesn't have too many connections to it. So both of these just have a simple loop from the failed port of the workspace back to the beginning. And then once all of the processing is complete, you'll get an email back telling you that it was successful. So I can go into automations on FME Server and have a look at that one. So that is this photo processing one. So in here, I actually, while I was testing this and trying to build it yesterday, added in a directory watch input as well. So again, this just shows that you can have lots of different inputs to your automation and they can start the same workflow. So I'll just stop this one for a moment so I can show you some things. So if you want to enable looping, you won't be able to drag them back by default. You'll need to go to the menu bar at the top here, and then this will say enable looping. So you can turn that one on, you'll get a little warning, which is what I mentioned in the slides. So you need to make sure that your sort of workflow is built so that you're not going to end up with an endless loop and your engine's constantly in use from this automation. So I'm going to agree, enable my loops, and then now you can see that the failed port, these are looping back to the input port here. So if you're new to automations, you haven't had a chance to play with it yet, you can add any node here using this icon in the bottom corner. So you've got triggers that you can add, which are the green nodes, actions that are sort of internal, like running workspaces, are orange. And then any external actions are blue. So things sending things out of FME server, so like an email in this case. So one of the things I thought about with this workflow yesterday, so I can show you how you can kind of set up or configuring a node in automations. I've got two different triggers here. So I've got directory watch and email, but my outgoing email is sending an email to the user who sent an email in. But if, so you can see here, that's using the output key from this email trigger so that it has the same email address. So the person who emailed it in will get the email back. But in the case of where I'm using the directory watch, my automation was giving me a lot of errors because it couldn't email it because this didn't have a value. So then I can just add a filter tool in here, filter messages, and then I will choose the email one, if I can see that, email sent from. And if it has an @ value, then I know there is an email address in there and it will pass the filter and then it will send an email. Otherwise, it will just stop. So that should stop me getting as many errors in my automation. So it's really easy to add these nodes to your automation and configure them. So now we can start the automation. And then just to make it easier, emailing the photos, and I'm going to use the directory watch in here. Go to the resources, and they're all inside this temp folder. I'm just going to move them out and then move them back in just to trigger that automation. Go back in here.
Yeah, that's another thing that we resolved in FME 2020 servers. Now, the directory watch will also see changes in time. So even if the files are the same size, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put those back in that emails received folder. So now I think my directory watch is set to poll every 15 seconds. So hopefully by the time I go back in there, it should have some things in the log file. So I can click on that one. Oops. Go to view the log file. And then one of the new features actually in 2020 that it's really small, but I think it makes everything a lot more usable, is this option here to show the log in reversed order. So normally your log file would start, if I show timestamps, from a while ago. So it would do like the oldest time first and then go to the more recent at the bottom. But now with this one, you can flip it. So now the most recent ones will show at the top, which makes it a lot easier for troubleshooting. So you can see here a few of my workspaces have failed, which is good. That's what I wanted for this morning, to show people some workspaces failing. But because I have that looping going through and the workspaces should eventually succeed as they go through, we shouldn't see any workspaces get left in my queue, because every time they loop, they're going to get resubmitted to that queue. And then we should just see completed jobs in here. So my queued page is empty, so they eventually have all gotten processed. And then you can see in here from that photo processing automation, some were failing, but now everything has succeeded. So the looping in there was working. Okay.
Wow, that's great.
Yep. And I think we did publish, or I say I published some articles that showcase a more complex looping example. So if you're interested in sort of some of the more things you can do with that, go and check out the knowledge article as well. But I think, Don,
Perfect.
this goes back to you now.
Yeah, so we'll get Steph to make me the presenter. And okay. And hopefully people see my screen.
I can see your slides. Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, so Jen gave us a really great demo there showing one of the really nice features that we've added to 2020 that just takes what we had in 2019 with the pass and fail port and enable us to, you know, take it to the next level, make it easy for you to retry workspaces with looping. But FME in automations in FME 2020, we take it to, you know, we even take it to the next level. One of the things again that we had planned right from the start, and users who started using FME 2019 picked up on really quickly, was there was no way for the workspace to have any impact or add data to the automation or in any way impact it. All you could do was orchestrate workspaces, run them in any order, but you couldn't actually have the workspace connect to the platform. So that's what, to the automations platform. So that's what we've done in 2020. So now what you, whoopsies, sorry. So now what you can do is we've written this FME Server Automations Writer, which is like any other writer and work in desktop. You simply add the writer, and now when you upload it into FME Server, each output feature type or table, whatever you want to call it, appears as an output port in the FME Server automation. And so that enables us to do a whole host of things. So you can see the little example I have there. And so the main point is now workspaces can control what happens within your automation and do many of these enterprise patterns that we're going to talk about. So so here's a little example. You can see I have a directory watch. I watch a directory, a file appears, I open it, I process it in this first FME workflow, and then depending on what type of data was dropped in, I have one of 4 other workspaces that can process the message. And then in this case, I'm just going to send a Slack message to myself if any of the workspaces at all failed. So then I'll know to go in and have a look. So now we're going to do a demo on that. So okay, so we'll go to first. I'll show it in Workbench. Okay. Okay, where are you? Here you go. And it's a really simple workspace. I'm only allowed to use 10 transformers, as you know. I simply read a CSV file, and then depending on this population, I output it to small, medium, large, and or humongous. Okay, so that's the workspace there. So now we're going to open the automation, and it's called Unleashed Final. And of course, I could have also right-click in here. Why won't you? Oh, it's running. Sorry. Stop. Okay. So I can also in here, and I can also view the same workspace in here, which is really useful if I want to have a quick view of the workspace. So there you can see same thing, CSV, tester, attribute, range with an, and of course I can look at each of them internally. So I'll close that. Now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to start it. Okay. So I've started that automation. And this automation simply watches a directory for a file. So now I'm going to put the file in there. Okay, so resources, data, gone. Okay, so I have my data here. So the first one I'm going to do is a very simple one. It simply has one record in it. Okay, so I'm going to simply copy that, action, copy. And then I'm going to move it into here. Okay. And I'm going to paste that in there. And so now, if I go over there, make sure I actually did it correctly. Yeah. So now if I go over back to my automation, I'm going to see, I go into here, Go in here and I view the job logs, you'll see that that was a medium state that was processed. So that's kind of cool. Now whatever comes in goes out. Now what I'm going to do to really show the power is I'm going to go into here and I'm going to copy this other file. Copy data on state split. Okay, make sure I did it correctly. State split. Let's have a look at that one. And you'll see, oh my goodness, this has a whole bunch of records in it. So I wonder what happened there. So let's look at automations. And I'm going to go back in here. And I'm going to look at the view the triggered logs. And now you're going to see that not only can I control where the message goes, I in fact can output many messages. So now that one file went into the, I'll go back here. That one file went into the state splitter, and for each record, it output a new message based on the records found in the file. And in fact, these workspaces will run in parallel. So yes, I could have processed the big state, large state, medium state, and small state in one workspace. However, there wouldn't have been parallelism, or parallelism would have been very hard to do. Also now, I'm able to simply change the small state. I have broken my whole workflow into smaller bite-sized modules. So that's you know, very, very exciting indeed. So yeah, so that's what another thing we can do. One message in, spray it out, do a whole bunch of processing, and then bring it back together. So that's yeah. So let's look at that. So these guys, what happened? And yeah, and the Zipster wants to know, can someone explain what we just saw? Okay, so what are some of the things we can now do in Automations 2020? Well, for any message that goes into a workspace, we can output multiple messages out of a single port, because the FME engine itself, it's just a writer like any other. And if you send multiple messages out, each of those messages will then be captured downstream and can trigger some action. As you saw there, you can also output any number of ports. So the messages, again, can come out of multiple ports. So in mine, I had messages come out of small, medium, large, and humongous. You don't have to have the writer write anything. The writer might not output anything at all. The one thing you do know is the completion ports always fires last. And there's only going to be one of those. You're either going to get a check mark if the workspace was successful, or an X if the workspace failed. And then, of course, as Jen demonstrated, you can also do looping. So you could have any of those workflows go back to anywhere in the workspace. And yeah, so that's, you can just see how with FME 2020 automations, now you have, you know, unprecedented flexibility. You can do whatever you wanted to do. Okay, so parallel processing, we did that in that one. As you could see, all those workspaces would come out. So here's another one. I'll demo this one later, but you can imagine, you know, a trigger event comes in. Maybe I got to do a lot of processing on a state, and then part of what I do is I break it up into all the counties of the state, and then I fire that down to the county processor workspace, and those can run in parallel. And then the counties do some work at the county level, and then they spray out a message for each block. So you can see how one trigger event can cascade. And if you have multiple engines, you can get a lot of work done very, very quickly. Yeah, so what about mass data loading? You know, FME engines are fast. We do every single release. We work hard to make them faster and faster. But at the end of the day, no matter how fast we make one engine, 2 engines is going to be faster, or 3 engines, 4 engines, 5 engines. Our goal at SAFE is always to not be the bottleneck and turn the bottleneck into the communication link or the target system, whether it be Google BigQuery, Google BigQuery GIS, Snowflake, and the list goes on and on and on. Any database with FME. And so how do we do that? Again, here's a very simple mass data loading workflow. I have one workspace where I specify the number of parallel jobs to run. And then I have a data loader that takes the portion of the data source that it's supposed to load and sends it into the database. Okay, so we'll do a demo on that. Go to manage automations. I'll turn this one off because it's checking every 10 seconds. So we'll stop that one. We don't need it anymore. And first I'm going to go into this mass data load 1. And in this one, it just simply says the parallelism is 1. I'm only going to use one job to do the data loading. I have it on a schedule, but I can trigger it. And that one's going to take a while. So now while that one's running, I'm going to go over to mass data load 10. And what this one's going to do is if I look here, you're going to see I say, hey, I have 10 engines, break it up into 10. And if I didn't have 10 engines and I still broke it up into 10, it would still do the parallelism. I just have to wait for the engine. So you don't have to worry if you specify more parallel tasks than you have engines. And I'm going to trigger that. Okay, that one was triggered. And now I'm going to go here. And you're going to see in this one, you're going to see, okay, here we're going. So now you can see the data loader is busy going on here. Okay, this one's probably done. Now I'll go back over to the other one. And if I'm quick enough, it's not done. But anyway, we'll see. View trigger jobs. And it was done. But that one took about 40 seconds. Okay, whereas the other one takes about 6 seconds. So that gives you the idea on how much quicker this parallelism is. This one started at 07 and finished at 15. So you can see the difference in the performance by parallelizing these data loads. I'm not going to actually go and look at the data. We saw that yesterday or on Tuesday with the FME Workspace. The point is now you can truly run them in parallel. So there we go. Okay. So these are all made possible by simply connecting automations with a new FME Server Automations Writer that we created in FME 2020. Super exciting. There's a blog that went out today or last night, and which we'll get to. And also Jen wrote an amazing knowledge base article. So what else can we do with automations in FME 2020? Well, there's this great book called the Enterprise Integration. That's all about enterprise integration patterns. And this is actually what we're using to define what we've done and what we're going to do next in FME 2020. So it's a great book. I recommend it if you want to see where we're going. And so far we've done 35 plus, more than 35 of these EI patterns. We verified that we can build them with FME. And the nice thing about our solution is you don't have to write a line of code. There's other tools out there that do enterprise integration. But the first thing you have to do is hire a really good programmer. I'd say if we say good programmers are very expensive, poor programmers are more expensive. So, and the thing with us is no code. So that's the exciting thing there. If you know FME, Workbench, it's not a big step up to be able to use automations for enterprise integration patterns. Okay, so what else is possible? These dynamic workflows. So on the right there, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but now you can have this, there's this this Uber pattern called Process Manager. And basically the idea is you can have one workspace which is smart that looks at the data, decides the order of tasks, and keeps doing the order of tasks one after the other. They could be done in different orders, multiple times. And then when they're done, it says it's complete. There's a bit of a Easter egg in that slide that I'm sure people at SAFE are smirking about. So enjoy that one. Okay. Also in the improved project support, we've made it easy to add automations to a project. And when you do add automations to a project, it'll actually identify for you the other components that are necessary and suggest that you add them to the project or not. Yeah. So some of the resources on automations, there's a blog that talks about enterprise integration patterns. If you go there now, safe.com/blog, you'll find that. And then Jen has a really nice article on the knowledge base that tells you how to get started, how to build things, how to create looping workflows and things like that. So yeah, it's important to remember that we're not done with automation. So please, if you try it, if you tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. We're always really, really happy to hear that. Okay. So the other new thing that we have for FME 2020 that's in a, I guess we're going to call it, we're in a technology preview or pilot. It's shipped, it's ready to go, but we want to get a bunch of users to get feedback because this is a new feature, and this is pay-as-you-go licensing. And what this does is enable something we call dynamic engine. And these are engines where you don't pay for the engine, you pay for the CPU time that is used. And this way you can launch as many engines as you want. So if you recall my earlier example, you might want to have 60 engines ready to do all the processing. Now the thing is, you don't pay for the engines when they're up. You only pay for the engines when they're actually processing work. So this is really, really key. So and when you're on your server and you would see dynamic engines are enabled there on FME 2020 now, and you can see I have a few days ago had about 3,500 hours of CPU time, engine CPU time remaining. So why did we do this? First thing is this is a new way of licensing FME server. It's complementary. We're not going to force anybody to go this route. It solves different problems. There's not many folks out there who are able to buy an FME server with hundreds of engines. Because maybe you only need that many engines for brief periods of time. But now with this pay-as-you-go, you can do that. You can have your FME server with your baseline number of engines. You can then add this dynamic, and you just add as many engines as you want, and there's no limit. So, and you know, why would you do that? Unpredictable or infrequent workflows. FME server apps. Maybe you have an FME server app that's super popular. And so with FME server apps now, if you have an app that's super popular, all of a sudden now users are able to determine the load on your server. And users on the web are very impatient. And so you might have a bunch of engines dedicated just to that FME server app, and knowing that you're only paying for the CPU that's used. So, and then you can handle your peaks, your valleys, all those sorts of things. Data streaming and IoT, we have a number of organizations that are using FME server for these dedicated data streams. And in that case, you dedicate an engine. And if the data stream is very peaky, has some busy times, some low times, maybe you're monitoring cars going into, a parking facility or something like that, then the amount of work that engine is doing can vary quite a bit. Okay, and so those are just some of the ways that pay-as-you-go can work. So let's do a demo here. Okay, so here we go. So this one, I'm going to use a different machine. I'm going to use my local host because I'm going to run a job and I'm going to spin up. Here's my workspace. And there's a couple things to notice the schedule. I only do that because then I can trigger it very easily. So I have this process state demo. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run, it's going to spin off a bunch of jobs that are called counties. But what I did is so we can see what's going on is I said, hey, run on the queue county. And the way I do that, of course, is under advanced. I simply specify the queue to run it on. And same on blocks. I specified run that in the queue block. So when I actually trigger this, okay, where's my terminal? I'm going to need that in a minute. Okay, so now when I run this job by triggering it, trigger this automation. Now, if I go look at the jobs, you're going to see I have that particular state has 60 counties. And if I look at the engines, okay, licensing and engines, you're going to see, on queues, engines. You're going to see I don't actually have any engines. I have one engine and it's only associated with the default queue, so it's not associated with the block queue or the county queue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to simply launch some dynamic engines. Okay, for counties, I'm going to launch 8. This will really make my fan on my laptop sing. Okay, so I've done that. So now I'm going to go back over to jobs. Okay, and look at queued. And okay, I should be going here. Okay, running. You're going to see no items are running. Oh, I bet you it's all finished. And I bet you now all the ones, so all those 60 jobs finished. Oh my goodness, now I have hundreds and hundreds of block jobs. Okay, so I in fact have, yeah, lots of block jobs there. Everything's, here's all the completed ones. You can see they were all my county jobs. And so now though, I'm in the same issue. I don't have any engines associated with block. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to say block 8. And now through the magic of Docker, it's going to assign 8 engines to county, to block, sorry. Okay, oh, my fan is screaming here. And don't fail me now, machine. Here we go. Yep, yep. And now, if we look at the completed jobs, you're going to see that now I am going to be completing block jobs. So now they're screaming through as well. And my licensing now, under licensing, the number, the CPU time is being chewed up. Okay, it was at 59, now it's at 58. And by the time I go back here to queued, I'm probably, now they're all done, and they've all been completed. So now all those processed block jobs. And again, I allocated 8 engines, so I would have been, got great parallelism there. I limited it to 8 because I don't want my machine to melt. So I'm going to turn those off now because just to be nice to my machine. So I simply scale all my dynamic engines down, and now I'm back to having simply one. Oh, there they are there. Give it a second. And now, okay, well, let's see the terminal. Okay, so now I go over here, deployment, refresh, and there we go. Now I'm back to one standard engine, and everybody's happy again. So yeah, so that is the pay-as-you-go licensing, and you can see this plays really nicely with the ability of automations now to have data-driven parallel processing. So we're pretty excited about this. It enables a whole new way of people to leverage FME server in a cost-effective manner. Nobody's going to go, well, almost nobody's going to go out and buy 100 engines. Now you could spin up, as many engines. And the thing about pay-as-you-go, it doesn't matter where you're running. If you launch an instance into, Azure or AWS, you could spin up as many spot instances as you wanted and use those as your dynamic engines, and it all works. It's completely platform agnostic. Okay, so this was my automation demo there, which we just did. And so, yeah, so do you want FME server for your organization? So what we've done is we've recognized that to purchase FME server, the initial, you have that first cost to buy it, and then the maintenance is 20%. So what we've done at Safe is we've looked at new ways to purchase the entire FME platform. So if you go to safe.com/pricing, you'll see our whole story there. Everything is transparent, so there's no trying to figure out what this platform is going to cost. But in particular, we have this new subscription pricing, and there's a few that I'm just going to mention quickly. The first one is for small utilities. This is basically you get unlimited FME desktop and server based on the number of customers that you have. So you can see, and this is unlimited. It doesn't matter how many users you have. Whoops. You're basically going to be able to use it. So yeah, so as much server, as much desktop as you want. The next one, whoops, I'm getting excited. The next one is the education subscription. And again, this is for any educational institute. And this is for running the institution. This is, running the IT or the systems that help the university run. This is not for education purposes like training, research, your GIS courses, your master's degrees, things like that. Those licenses are part of our grant program, and those are free. This is all about helping institutes connect their various systems together for actually production of the business side of education institutes. Yeah. Okay. Whoops. don't know what happened. Okay, local government is another one. Again, based on the population of your city or town. Again, all you can eat. I'll refresh that. There's a, yeah. There you go. And again, the amount you can have is unlimited. Okay. So that's that one. And then, of course, there's just our standard enterprise subscription that, again, this one is a much more cost-effective way to get the entire platform. And it's based on, you know, the amount you pay, basically 35% every year. It's a subscription, so you pay it every year, where our traditional is you would pay it 100% of the price, and then you would pay the maintenance. So again, working at ways to make it more cost effective for you to get all the FME that you want. Okay, so with that, I think it's time for our another poll. Let's do another poll. So it'd be great to know, what feature are you most excited to try? So staff will do that.
Yep, it's just running here. Votes are flying in, so I'll leave it up for a little bit longer. Trickling off. All right, I'm gonna close it down in about 5 seconds here, so get your votes in. All right, here we go, closing it down.
Great, awesome. And yeah, so we can see that no surprise, the top two were automations and server apps. And again, our goal, of course, is to, where did my, whoa, okay, yeah, you can do either of those with no code. So that's the whole thing. Security, of course, important to everybody, but not something that might get us terribly excited. And then, yeah, and the web UI publishing just makes life so much easier. So that's great. Okay, so where's my, okay. So now let's go back to my slides. Okay. Okay, so can you see my slides now? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yeah. So really, if you, oh, the lizard disappeared. He's an invisible lizard. If you haven't tried FME Server 2020, we say you really haven't tried FME Server, and that's so funny. And you want to try it out at, here's how you can get it: safe.com/FME/FME Server trial. Of course, the home license, we're happy to provide you with an FME server as well, so you can try it and get used to it. If you want to do a pilot or a proof of concept to try to sell it within your organization, we're happy to work with you to make that happen as well. So, oh, there he is, that crazy lizard, I tell you. Okay, so yeah, so the world tour, going back to, you know, what I talked about at the beginning was the COVID-19. We've had to cancel the in-person world tour cities. So what we're doing, though, is we're building a delivery of all the great content that our team and our partners and our users have put together to deliver that in an online fashion. There's just so much great material that we don't want to not share it with all our users. I mean, yeah. So we're disappointed, of course, that we don't get to travel and meet many of our partners and users. We trust that this time will pass, and then it'll be more back to a normal state. So yeah. So yeah. So with that, look at that. We're 2 minutes early, Jen.
Ooh, that's good for us.
Yeah. So any questions you want to?
I've been having a look. The main one that stuck out for me is, what's your theory on how the Zipster got inside that hammock?
What's that?
How do you reckon the Zipster got inside the hammock?
I don't know. I think maybe the lizard would have to pick him up, or maybe that bird has something to do with it. Maybe he's like super strong.
Yeah. So I think there are a few questions. I think the team has been pretty good actually at answering them. Most of them seem to have answers. There are a few just clarifying around, I think when you were talking around the parallel processing, the fact that that's being done depending on the number of engines you have available. It's not like parallel processing like CPU wise.
Right, each engine does,
Yeah,
that's right. So each engine is running one workspace. And so if you had 10 engines, then you could run 10 workspaces at a time. And within the engine, of course, if the engine is able to use multiple cores or things like that, there are some places in FME where that happens, then that would be in addition to that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I think there are a few questions about looping. So whether you can sort of set a maximum number of loop iterations. But
Right.
so we don't have that now, but I guess you can build a workspace that you could
Yeah,
probably add in there as a tool that would count iterations,
yeah,
I guess, and then you could filter it that way with the automations
yeah.
writer, I think.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's 9. We'll stay on and answer some questions, but we know many people are time constrained. So we just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and you know, whether you have a question today or tomorrow, we have our live chat that's always there, or you can send us an email. We really thrive on getting feedback from users and partners and that. And yeah, also thanks to the SAVE team behind the scenes who's been answering lots of questions, and it's great. And thanks to you, Jen,
Thank you.
for doing this. It's great.
Yep.
John, there was a question about FME and Docker.
Right.
That
So yeah, okay, yeah. So I run FME server. I don't see the question, but I run FME server. That's how I run FME server on my Mac. Is I always run it in Docker, and then I can spin up engines and that sort of thing. I'm happy to share the scripts that I have if anybody wants those.
yeah, it was
Also,
just
we
sorry,
didn't
one.
touch on it, but FME server can also run within Docker containers in a Kubernetes environment. We have a few. That's one of the deployment options in FME 2020, and we have some large customers who are using Kubernetes to cluster to, and one of the things they have running in that cluster is FME server. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a couple of the questions around Docker, one of them is about like how stable would you say it is on Docker? And the other one I think was curious about the command line stuff you were doing with Docker that you were showing, like what that was doing.
Right. Yeah. So Docker is one of the supported platforms, and so our test suite runs on Docker. So we're very serious about Docker. It's not a sort of a, you know, an off the side of somebody's desk. It is a supported platform. Yeah. So on my terminal, I'm just running. I just have a bunch of scripts I ran that I can share, and inside, you know, it's just this Docker. So if I look at the scale dynamic one, for example. It's simply just a Docker command that you know, and you can see it there. So rather than try to remember how to type that, I just created a little script. But I'm happy to share those with anybody, or we can maybe write a knowledge article and then have these as resources. So yeah. But I love Docker. I'm able to pull a new build of FME all the time. So yeah. You use Docker as well, don't you, Jen? I think a lot of us do. It's safe.
Yeah, I think it just makes it quicker and easier just to have the latest version on there. You can just run a few commands and you've got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also run, you know, you can run within a single Docker single machine. You can it enables us to test the fault tolerant stuff as well on a single machine, and the FME and all the components think that they're running on across machines because they can't tell the difference. So not that that's terribly useful, but it is from a testing standpoint. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Good.
I think all the questions are starting to taper off a little bit. I just chatted out, Holly's listening in and she helpfully shared an article about Docker commands. So I chatted that out to people. We had a question about what, if FME server is available on Windows, Linux, like what platforms it's available on.
Yeah, so it's available, and the answer to that is yes. So it's available on Linux. Ubuntu 18 is our preferred platform, and it's available on Win32 and Win64. But most people want Win64. So yeah. So by far the number one platform that our customers are deploying FME server on at the current time is Windows, and then yeah, Linux is growing, and yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we got it. I'll go ahead and shut this down. So thank you guys so much.
Perfect.